Welcome to my YouTube channel, Rick Surowicz Watercolor. At any time during the video, you can click on the link in the lower right hand corner to subscribe to my channel. And if you enjoy the video, be sure to like it. That helps me keep my channel going. Hi everybody, this is Rick. I'm in my studio. And this is a continuation of a series of projects that I've been posting on my website over time. And this is going to be series 4 in a series of miniature paintings. So there's going to be 4 paintings in this series. And this is the first painting. And this is the setup that I'll be using for this quick tutorial. So the projects in this series aren't intended to be long, complex paintings. They're just short little mini paintings, and they're intended just to give you an opportunity to kind of paint freely and just experiment with some techniques. And I've set this up using 5.5 by 7.5 inch pieces of paper. So I'm working on 140 pound cold press watercolor paper, and I have a template. It's a very simple template, and I'm going to be painting some daisies. And this template you'll find on the project page of my website, and the link is in the description. And one of the reasons I've used this 5.5 by 7.5 is it's a quarter of a quarter sheet of a full sheet of watercolor paper. So if you've taken a full sheet of watercolor paper that is 22 by 30, and you break it into quarters, it gives you 4 sheets that are 11 by 15. I often demonstrate 11 by 15 sheets, and a quarter of one of those sheets ends up being this size. So that's the size I'm going to be working on. And now I'm just going to go ahead and start painting. So if you look, you just see just a very simple indication of the center of some flowers and some marks radiating out of it from that. And that's just kind of my shapes for my daisy. It's not intended, like I said, this isn't intended to be a real complex painting. And I'm going to go ahead and start just by painting these centers of the flowers. So I'm going to take, let's see, a little bit of gamboge, maybe a little raw sienna. You don't have to use the colors I'm using, just use what you have. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the centers of these. And these would be my daisies. So I'm putting 3 daisies in here. And I'm using a number 8 round brush. You don't want to, there's no reason to use a little brush and just keep dabbling with it. And I'm actually going to take a little quinacridone gold, and I'm just going to touch the side or the edge a little bit to give it some stronger color. And now I'm just going to take a hairdryer, and I'm going to take a little burnt orange. I want a little stronger shading on that. There we go. So this is burnt orange. You could use a little touch of raw sienna or something. You could even use a reddish tone if you wanted. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a hairdryer and I'm going to dry this. And then I'm going to show you how sometimes I'll make texture on this. So I've dried that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a spray bottle. And I'm just barely going to push the button just to create a little bit of a spritz of water. And I have to kind of look sideways when I do this just to see if I'm hitting the flower. And just let that sit a second. So I'm going to take a tissue and I'm just going to kind of strike it sideways. And now you can see I get a little bit of a texture in there. And if I was working with a little bit darker value, you'd see that texture would be a little stronger. But that gives me what I'm after. And now I'm going to take a little sap green and a little pyro red. So that pyro red going across the color wheel starts to neutralize this green, and it's just giving me just a neutral tone, keeping it leaning towards green. And I'm going to put a wash, a little more green in that maybe, and I'm just going to put a wash over some of this. Actually, I'm using too small a brush. I'm going to use a wash brush here, a little bigger. Take a little of that yellow too and add to my wash. So I have the centers of the flowers, a little shadow in there, give it a little form. So, I have these centers of the flowers, and I'm putting some of these values in here, and just a big wash, letting that just kind of run, and we'll let some of this kind of disappear, or this white off the petals kind of go into the open area here. It's very light, so far. It's pretty light what I've done. And at this point, I'm gonna add a little, start to give a feeling of direction to these petals, maybe. All right. So now I'm going to dry this again. Actually, I'm going to take a little bit more of my green, maybe some yellow. Got a little more of that in there. So add some of this while it's still wet. Okay, so there's no reference that I'm using. I just, this is kind of a fun little exercise, just painting some daisies and imagining some of the shapes that you get created with that. So let me dry this once again, and I'm going to start to paint some areas of negative space to help start to define some petals. Okay, so that's dry. Now I'm going to use, this is a brush I like to use. It's a quill brush. And I'm going to start to take a little of the sap green that I have. Add a little bit more of this pyro red in here just to tone it down a little. Yellow. And now I'm going to start to paint that space in between the petals. So if I'm envisioning, the shapes of daisy petals. So this would be the space that I'm seeing in between the petals. And I want to make sure I connect with the edge of my composition. I don't want to just have things floating in space, because I'm designing this whole page. And let's see, we'll put some little shapes in here. So hopefully you can start to see a daisy, kind of suggestion of a daisy being carved out of that. And now I'll start to come down here. A little bit here. Not going to see as much on this one. I'm just going to let it kind of show the shape, but it's not going to be as defined and as big. But It's still going to be some of these. I'm still working with these areas around what would be around the petals. And then if I had another daisy here, and I just make up some of these shapes as I go. So right now, the color or the value I'm working with is pretty much a middle value. So I start to suggest some daisies here. Bring it in a little. I'm going to soften this shape that I made and let that run a little bit. So this is a fine mist spray that I have. So I put those shapes in and I let that run a little bit. It gives me some soft edges, some hard edges. And I'm going to blot up some of the excess moisture that I have. And I started to work that kind of a yellow tone in. I want to get a little bit more of that somewhere else to get a better balance of that color. Get some of that distributed in some of that negative space. And let's see, well, that's still wet. I think I'll come in there. All right, so now, once again, I'm going to get up here. I'm going to dry this. All right, let me give this a dry. Okay, that's dry. I'm going to continue painting with my quill brush, and I'm going to start to get a little darker. So what would happen if I had some shapes back here? What if I had some other flowers and some petals? Some leaves back here. So I start to envision what a stem or something moving through space would look like. If it started here and now it comes down through here, it can continue on. So if I had some type of a stem or something that was moving through here, it would start to show up in these different places. And so I start to pick those up and then start to imagine those. But also I'm going to come back now and I'm going to go a little darker with some of these shapes. So now I can interrupt this and I leave a light area to make it look like there's a lighter shape moving across here. So I'll continue that on here and envision a vine or something coming across there, and it could even go a little bit farther. So I start to, imagine what those might look like. And paint some of those shapes in. So I started with a larger soft wash. And get a little darker with the values. I haven't used a lot of colors at all. A sap green and with some pyro red for a lot of this. I used a couple different yellows as I was painting the centers. So sometimes I'll come in like with this shape here. I want to strengthen that, and I want to soften as it goes away. And I'll take this little spray and I'll just dissolve it kind of as it moves away and soften that edge. You just imagine different types of intersections here with these different flowers, if the petals in there. See, I can paint just a little mark like that and just gives the impression that there's another negative space between some petals of a flower. Go a little bit this way. So I want to develop an edge here a little bit more between these flowers. So I'm going to paint a little larger area and show a little bit more of what might be in the background here. Just get a little darker. And I think I'll take a little bigger brush. And then I'm going to spray that a little bit. So get a little bit of a wash of a lighter value to tone some areas down. Okay, so I dry my paper a lot when I'm building layers like this. So I'm going to dry this once again. I'm going to come in with some darker values. Okay, so I'm going to paint a few more shapes in here. I often blot with a tissue to break up a wash or make something look a little more interesting or soften an edge. Okay, so I'm going to take some sap green. I'm going to take a little alizarin crimson and a little royal blue. This is a dark royal blue that I have, just a little bit in there. And I'm going to make some darker valued marks. So here, let's say I wanted to carry some type of a grassy shape or stem or something coming back here. Here I just see how that helps describe an edge just by moving that behind it in space. Let's see, this is a little wet, but I'm still going to put that mark in there. And I just look for areas to put some of these. Let's see, we'll go here. I can bring something out here and give the impression that there's things, grassy shapes that are moving in here. Just using some line. That was a little too dominant. I'm going to soften that. So now I have some kind of movement going on behind this. And it's just things to make it interesting. I'll go a little darker in this. think I want to dry that, and I'll come in with a darker, soft, or harder edged mark. It's too wet right now to give me what I'm really after. Add a little more royal blue to this. So this is something you can do, just experiment and have a lot of fun with. There's not a lot of, it's not a big commitment. You're not using a big piece of paper. Make it a learning experience. You can you could turn it into a gift card, or a card or a note card to give to somebody. Just have a little bit of fun experimenting. Soften that. Okay, I want to dry it again. I want to put some darker marks in here, but it's too wet. I want them to be hard edge, so I need to dry it so I can put those marks in there that I want to put. Actually soften those a little bit. Okay, so I want to put a few marks in here. That are more hard edged. Go. Still not completely happy with the marks I have there. I'll go a little darker. Alright, I'm just going to soften that. Getting too fussy with that, so I'm just going to back off that. Put in one mark here. Alright, let me go ahead and I think I'll dry this. Alright, I think that shape is too big, too dark, and I'm going to soften that. So we'll just leave that alone. Alright, so let me dry this. Okay, so put a few marks in here. So this is a darker value. It's a mixture of royal blue, sap green, and alizarin crimson. Just a few dark touches. Okay. And that's probably, so I might add a little color into this. like I said, you can make this into a greeting card. And let me go ahead and dry this. Okay, and that's where I'm going to stop. It's a very simple little painting. You don't have to get too involved with it. Put a little mat around it. You can make it a little miniature painting. Like I said, you could turn this into a card. And just to give you an idea of taking the same concept just a little bit farther, I'm going to show you quickly. Now here's a more involved painting. This is a quarter sheet, so it's 11 by 15 inches. It's the same approach in painting that I took with this. It's a little bit more involved, has a little bit more layers, some darker values, some more defined shapes. But it's really the same thing that I did here with this painting. Let me move that back. So this is project 1 in this series of 4, and I hope you have fun with it. And like I said, if you enjoyed painting this, be sure to like the video. It helps me keep my YouTube channel going.